Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending. This is the makeup class for our gut microbiome, and I hope that it's been helpful in having a different view about things. It's really been um, extremely enjoyable for me because when I do research, and I love sharing these things. I was listening to a podcast. Again, there's this one called The Perfect Stool, and it happens to be a healthcare professional who looks at a stool for what it should be, which is really an indication about how your digestive system is working. And she was talking with a doctor who was a cancer specialist who deals with helping your body fight cancer. And she was very in tune with the microbiome. And it was just amazing when she was speaking because she said that what we're finding out now is that based upon the microbiome that we have inside of us, because these microbes are producing chemicals for the human body, certain medical protocols work better on people with certain microbiome colonies than others that have different ones. And it really makes sense if you can understand the concept of how nature produced us and what we're really meant to be. This human body has a relationship and cannot exist without microbes that are used to produce the essential components for the human body to run in optimal form. And plants are like chemists. They produce all of these different chemicals, all of these different compounds. And when all of these compounds are there, hold on one second, I just mute everybody. When all of these compounds are produced by these plants, they have a certain connection with our DNA. And that is called the epigenetic connection. What that means is that as a human being, we have our DNA, and our DNA basically is a blueprint of what our human body should be able to do, and some of the traits such as eye colors and different traits as far as height and weight and skin color and all of these different things. But what else we have is we have these microbes inside of us that are part of our system, along with the plants that we bring into our body. And the epigenetics are the final products of those plant items that allow our switches in our DNA to be turned on for optimum performance. And the term is relatively new. It's called the epigenetics. In other words, our genetic code, I have the ability to fight cancer as an example. And my body knows exactly what to do with it. What it does is that when a cancer cell is formed, what it'll do is it will camouflage the nutrition stream from that particular cancer cell, and that cancer cell will not get nutrition. It will be reabsorbed into the body and it will be gone. But if my switch is not turned on and the accelerator put down, then my body is not going to do that, and cancer will grow in my body. And the beauty is that our foods have an epigenetic connection to the human genome. And more importantly, our foods also feed certain microbes better than other microbes. So the microbes that we really want to have in our body are the microbes that are starving with our food system today. They're absolutely starving. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to a slide now and show you again some of these numbers so that you can get a better idea of exactly what I'm talking about and what's inside of us. Okay, so this is a digestive system right here. And when we look at the digestive system, we have very few that populate the stomach because of the acidity. It's only between 10 to the second to 10 to the third. So it's a very small population. Only between 1,000 and 10,000 microbes can live in that acidic environment. And then we go into the small intestine. And the small intestine is 26 to 27 feet long. So it's almost 4 times your body height. And in this, it goes from being a very fast moving, raging, very acidic environment to changing the flow and changing the pH. And in that environment, you have more colonies that can be part of that system, between 100,000 and 100 million that can colonize that area. But then you drop into the lower area, the colon. And this is the area where all the magic begins, and that we're starving. We're absolutely not feeding these guys. And these are the guys that produce all of the chemicals that our body needs. They have between 10 billion and 10 trillion microbes. And I want to point out that the difference between the low end and the high end is 1,000 difference in the amount that you can have there. Now, these bacteria that live there have certain characteristics. Here are the different names that they have. And they have different food stocks that they eat. If you look at the first area, the stomach area, there's one, the third one down here, which is called Helicobacter pylori. And pylori, and this has been one that people have been hearing more and more about, because pylori ends up being a bacteria that can get too large in population and can start to cause some problems. Any of these bacteria, any of these different colonies that are residing within us, it's extremely competitive for them. In other words, the real estate is limited. The food supplies are dictating who's getting fed their favorite foods and who's not. But everybody wants to live. Everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to continue to get food and reproduce and be part of that ecosystem. One of them in particular is a bacteria which is called Candida. And Candida is a very, very interesting bacteria, because most bacteria only have about 28 genes. However, Candida has 6,000 or so genes, which is huge in comparison to the good bacteria in your gut. And antibiotics that are given to human beings for any kind of infections or whatever, they will decimate the bacteria in your gut, but they will not affect the yeast, and Candida is considered a yeast. So Candida ends up, if you take an antibiotic and then you're putting food stock in, which ends up being sugar and sweet and highly refined foods, you end up having Candida proliferate, often creating biofilms that they can hide under, and they move into the real estate in your gut. They occupy all the good apartment units, taking over all the parking spots. And later, when you swallow a little probiotic, hoping it'll replenish your gut flora, it's like it's coming along and asking the Candida to move out. The Candida is going to laugh at it. Imagine walking into a biker bar and asking one of the leather-clad Hell's Angels to move off his bar stool so you can have a seat. That's what it's like inside your gut when you have a gut yeast overpopulation like Candida, and you're trying to remove it by taking some kimchi or some lactobacillus in the form of yogurt or some healthy drink. It ain't going to do a thing. Because what's happened is that without being mindful of what we've done, we have a mindless community within us that we can take control of. And we can take control of it very easily by just understanding what this whole process is. Because when we're eating food, the food is going into this tube, which is not part of the human body. This tube is completely separate. Right from the mouth right down to the butt, it's a complete tube. We're basically like a donut with a hole inside, but the hole has a lot of wiggles and wags and ends up being over 30 feet long. But inside of there are conditions where perfect fermentation of fibers can take place with bacteria that can produce the chemicals that then communicate to the human body and produce a balance both in the mind and the body of the human body. We take a look here at this chart. We covered this in the past, but this is so important to kind of visualize what our diet does to us and what we have growing inside of us. If you think about it, these bacteria are residing inside of us. And in our lives are just huge compared to the lifespan of a bacteria. Bacteria only exist for around 20 minutes on average. So if you think about that, in one day that we live, these bacteria have gone through 72 lifetimes. So what does everything want to do in this planet? It wants to live, it wants to thrive, it wants to feed, it wants to eat, it wants to reproduce, and that's what these bacteria do. However, if we're not feeding them, they go into survival mode. And what happens on a big scale, like if we're dying for food, you know, we go to whatever we have to resort to be able to get food, and that's what the bacteria do. So what do they end up doing? Well, what is produced in the gut when everything is being done properly and the magic is happening is, let's say I eat some of the gut microbe favorite food, which is fiber, soluble, insoluble fiber. So I'm having some chickpeas and I'm having some beans and I eat that and I feed these bacteria. And what happens is a first set of bacteria come in there and break that lentil down and break it down into another component. And when they do that, they release nutrients and they release a byproduct. And the byproduct becomes food for another set of bacteria that come in and break it down even further, producing additional nutrients and additional food for the cellular walls. And then the third set comes in and does a final process and produces this beautiful substance. It's a mucus. It's like manna from heaven for the gut wall, and it's just beautiful. And if you look on the left side of this chart here, we have this thick coating, and it's called the mucin layer, and it's a mucosal wall. And this is beautiful because this is what is your immune system. This is what keeps microbes from getting into your body. This is the protection you have, and the surface area of your whole digestive system is that of a tennis court. So if you think about how large that is, you need to really make sure that that whole tennis court were coated right and would have a thick coating. In order to do that, you really have to have some mindfulness about what you're eating so that you got the raw material in there, and then you got to make sure you got the bacteria in proper colony sizes so that they can do their magic. Because if they're going to do their magic, and if they break this stuff down and you've got a healthy system there, then your body's immune system is not going to have to worry about anything coming too close to it because you got this nice cushion. Whereas on the right, all of a sudden, if your bacteria are not getting fed and you break this mucosal wall down because the bacteria are hungry and they've got to eat it, all of a sudden, you've got your blood side, which is this lower side where there are certain cells which are called dendritic sampling. Right here is a picture of a dendritic cell. And it sticks this antenna up through this tiny opening in between the cells. And it does a sampling of what's going on up there. And if it picks up on a bacteria or a piece of food, it has the ability to do a magnetic DNA scan of the nucleus and come back and record that DNA scan of what it just found and immediately bring the immune system to the attention that we've got an invader and produce killer T cells that are now going to go throughout the blood system and be on guard for the intruders that were knocking on the door on your gut wall, because your gut wall didn't have the mucosal lining, which was the lining that would ensure that nothing's getting too close. And this is what we've done in our society inadvertently because of our food system going to maximum profit, maximum storage. Nutrition is talked about in a whole different way, not the way that it's really meant to be talked about. Nutrition is getting the photochemicals, the photonutrients from the foods and that epigenetic connection I talked about. So let's say I'm eating tart cherries, and tart cherries have these phenols and these antioxidants called anthocyanins. Well, those phenols and those colors, they feed certain microbial groups that produce certain chemicals in my body that have certain effects on my body that are very beneficial for my body. They also produce this other chemical called anthocyanins, which are antioxidants that get released throughout my body, and the bacteria go after those as well. So by getting these foods in, what it's also doing is then these bacteria are triggering my DNA through their epigenetic connection for my DNA to start producing what it's supposed to do, which are anti-cancer functions, anti-inflammation functions, anti-pain functions. And that's what the human body is always trying to do, is to find this equilibrium and this balance. And in order to do that, we were given these microbes to help us do that. And when we co-evolved with them, we were eating between 60 and 80 grams of fiber a day. You know, we didn't have stores to go to. We were eating the foods that we co-evolved with, and our bodies were getting everything they needed. And now with science, with the ability to understand things like the epigenetics, now it's very easy to apply these and start to bring these superfoods into our body to feed the microbes. You know, and what are these foods? They're the foods that were staples in our diet: collard greens, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbages, lentils, beans, superfoods, avocados, you know, the foods that, seeds and nuts. Oh my God, nuts are so good for you. Nuts can transform. Nuts are one of the best foods for your microbiome. But what you got to do is, when you're thinking about a new awareness, a new way of looking at life, that your brain isn't alone anymore. You're not stuck alone. There's a lot you can do to improve both your physical and your mental health, because your physical health is predicated upon the byproducts that are produced from the bacteria and the foods that you're feeding them. And when we get those, our body knows what to do with them. And epigenetically, we know what to do with them. And if we can now start to think differently and start to look at that being a responsibility, as opposed to maybe a privilege if you have money and you can eat whatever you want, or being just a function that you do every day if you're not in that position. But either way, what if we have the choice? What if all of a sudden I could tell you that you could eat to have less inflammation in your body? Or by having yogurt every day, the studies show that every single person in the test group had a better attitude about their future and life itself. And how could that be? Well, guess what? Lactobacillus are beautiful bacteria that are located in the cultures of the yogurt. And when they start to proliferate in the gut, they're producing chemicals like serotonin and GABA, which through the vagus nerve, and we have this beautiful vagus nerve, which we've only learned about it recently in the last 20 years, the function of this vagus nerve has between 100 and 200 million endpoints that are used for two-way communications between the brain and all of the microbes throughout our whole system, from our mouth right down to our anus. And all of these sensors are giving two-way chemical signals back and forth. These bacteria are actively participating in our lives, so much so that it affects our sleep cycles. our sleep cycles that the human body go through are equally as important for the bacteria colonies to go through, for them to go through that same process, because the chemicals that are emitted from the bacteria as their colonies are decreasing in size are different than the chemicals that are being put out when they're increasing in size. So what we want to do is we want to shut these chemical systems down so we can detoxify every night. And we also don't want these bacteria producing chemicals all night long, because those are chemical signals that'll keep our mind awake and keep other functions awake when we're supposed to be getting restorative action. So one of the prevailing things that we're looking at, that scientists are looking at, and people that are longevity experts are looking at, is that we need to have what we call intermittent fasting. I call it timed feeding, interval feeding, so that if I've got this beautiful microbial balance that I'm working on, why not limit the amount of time that I'm going to be feeding? Because therefore, I can have more control over who I'm feeding and who's going to be resident within me, because I can control that. And if I start to control that, and by the way, one of the most detrimental things to the human body is sugar. No matter how you look at it, sugar, sugar, sugar. It's pure energy. The body does not want pure energy. Maybe if you needed pure energy for an instant, you know, it would make sense to have sugar, but sugar is not formed in nature in its natural form. It's in sugar cane, where in order to get out the amount you'd have to, you'd consume a lot of energy to do that. You know, people used to chew on sugar cane and you get a much lower, and it's in a raw form. But sugar feeds, it's like rogue energy. And when you have defective mitochondria in your body, which mitochondria are the fungi and the energy systems, they feed on sugar because it's accessible. And they don't have a lot of ability, because they're damaged. They don't have the ability to get the food source that they need. They'll take anything available, and they'll take that sugar, and the damaged mitochondria will proliferate. And the damaged cells will proliferate with sugar. It's cheap energy. It's like throwing fertilizer on foods in the field. Yeah, I can get my plants to grow. I can give nitrogen. I can give, you know, all of the nutrients to the plant chemically, and really get them to grow great. But how nutritious are they going to be for me? And that's what I want you to look at, is think about what the possibilities are if we start to put our awareness towards what's residing inside of us. Because it's unequivocal, whether we accept it or not, that we're going to learn that the brain is living inside of us, which are these microbes, and they transmit 90% of your serotonin is produced by bacteria. And I can tell you that these bacteria, the evidence, the studies that they're showing, the interactions with the human body, there are two-way communications going both ways, and they play a huge integral part in all of our health. And balance is all we want to have. You know, candida is okay in the body if it's in the proper form. If it's in a small population, in the proper spot in the gut, and it's stored there, and then when we die, its real purpose is to decompose the body from the inside out. Now, candida is a really interesting one, because this will give you an idea. This is a protocol that can be done to get rid of candida. And in other words, you just can't change some things very easily. It's taken years for us to get certain infestations. So I kind of have an analogy in my farm field that if I had a field where, you know, let's say prickly weeds were growing, a certain weed that had prickers all over it, and they proliferate. Every time they flower, they put more seeds, and it grows and it grows, and nobody was watching, and these seeds got really big out there. Well, if I go out there once and I try to get all of the seed heads off and I stop, I'm going to get some of it, but I'm not going to get all of it. I've got to be persistent. And I've got to do it over and over and over and over again until I get it back into balance where it should be in that system. And that's what we need to look at if we're trying to rebuild this beautiful magical garden that we can have inside of us. that if we can get that to start to function the way it was meant, there's no reason for any disease to exist in the human body, because all of the DNA signals will be turned on from your foods coming into your body, and all the photochemicals and all of the chemicals that are produced by the bacteria should be there. That's the way the human body was meant to operate. It wasn't meant to operate on a Big Mac and a set of fries. It was meant to have things like turmeric and garlic and leeks and onions and microbes that eat those and produce the chemicals to do it. So I want to get back to S. boulardii or Candida. And Candida is in the yeast family. And once it proliferates, it's very difficult to get rid of. If you are given a fungicide which will kill yeast by a doctor, and you happen to kill Candida in your digestive tract, it will release neurotoxins that can cause severe pain and severe physical problems that you will have to go through till those neurotoxins get through your body. The best way is to get Candida to get pushed out of the way. And this is out of a book that I'm reading called Grow a New Body. And I'll show you the book at the end of the class as well. It's a great book. I've read plenty of books on this topic, and this gentleman, who's a shaman, he had been diagnosed with parasites being riddled in his body. His heart and his brain were badly deteriorated. He was actually going to be getting a heart transplant, and he realized that he had the knowledge within him, and he wanted to unlock that. So he went to traditional route. He went to the jungles with the shamans, and he unlocked a lot of the truths that allowed him to heal his body. His belief system is that if we produced with our DNA the blueprint of this human body, then that blueprint is still within us, and we can access it by having the ways to access those blueprints. And there's ways you do that. Through fasting is one of them, by going through different ways where the body goes through first autophagy, it goes into ketosis, then autophagy, taking the weakest cells out of the body, and then it goes through this process of then when you start feeding, it produces stem cells and will reproduce any cell that needs reproducing in the body. The blueprint is there, and the blueprint can be accessed. But how does that happen? By the epigenetics of the foods that we get into our body. Garlic is the second most epigenetically connected food to the human genome. And not surprisingly, as Dr. Weil says, it's 50% of the cures for the human body, because what does it do? It doesn't cure the human ailments. It enables our DNA, our bodies, or it breaks down with the bacteria to produce the chemicals that allow our DNA to express itself in our body to go to health. So getting back to S. boulardii, just to give you an idea, this is a fun part of working on your body, that you can experiment and do things. And one of the things you do, it's simple to grow. This is called homemade S. boulardii. And it's simple to grow your own strain of this probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii, or we call it S. boulardii for short, which can help with dramatically reduce your gut population of Candida. The S. boulardii are living organisms, and they will respond to your thoughts and feelings. I say a blessing over them the same way I pray over my food for a meal. After you prepare a batch, you can use a spoonful of your S. boulardii as a starter for your next batch. However, here's what you need to do. You gather 4 cups of organic ripe fruit from your garden or your grocer. Overripe fruit is excellent. It has lots of sugars. He loves using blueberries, raspberries, pears, mangoes, frozen berries work great. You blend them in a fruit blender. You add 1 cup of water. You then cook them in a saucepan just below boil for around 20 minutes. And that purifies and gets rid of any wild bacteria. You then let it cool to body temperature, and you add 2 gelatin crystals of S. boulardii, which would be a probiotic that you buy, and you sprinkle that in there. And then you place this bowl in an oven with the light on, but the oven not on, because the light produces a small amount of heat. And what happens is over the next 2 to 3 day period, you'll smell yeast in your house like you're making the most beautiful bread, and you're producing this bacteria, and you'll see you stir it every day just to get it agitated. And this bacteria is now, this yeast is growing in all the sugars and all of this organic fruit. And then after 2 to 3 days, you'll notice it stops and it might have a slight alcohol taste because it's now gotten to its limit. You put that in the fridge. For the next 2 weeks, you take 1 spoon of Espellardi and you put that into your mouth and you swallow that before you start taking food for the rest of your day. And you do that for a 2 week period. And what Espellardi will do is it will come into your digestive system, and it has a way to be aggressive but not destructive, and it inhabits the spaces and moves them out of the prime real estate that is being taken by Candida, and it now allows new bacteria, because Espellardi will pass out in about 5 to 6 days, and now the job is to start to put live probiotics, live foods back with new bacteria to inhabit that real estate. So now you've got who you want inhabiting inside of you. And when you can do that, you now can change the whole system that is producing a lot of the effects that we're getting in the human body. Because when Candida doesn't get fed, let me switch off here because we've been on the same slide here for a while. So when Candida doesn't get fed, it gets very angry. And when Candida does get fed, it has a way to be able to make sure that you're going to come back for and feed it. It produces a chemical that we get used to in our brain. Not that it makes us high or anything, but it just is a chemical that our brain is absorbing and our brain gets used to. And when we don't get it, we crave it. And if we don't get it long enough, we go through withdrawal, almost like an addict would go through withdrawal from an opioid. And you can get symptoms of agitation, anxiety. You're driving in the car, you wanted to kick the cat before you left. The car in front of you it can't move quick enough. Everything is going wrong. You're feeling all this pressure. And you didn't want to have that bagel, but you pull in because you finally just say, I'm going to do it. And you get that bagel and you take a bite of that bagel. And immediately, once you've made the decision to get the bagel, by the way, the bacteria are already getting the signal that they know. The bacteria are already starting to rejoice because they know they got you. They know they figured out how to get you, and you're now listening like a good host should, do whatever the bacteria want. You eat that bacteria. Now Candida gets that and it gives the final shot. It puts the chemical back in the brain and you get the aha calming feeling because the drug addict just got their drug. You don't get high, but you don't have the withdrawal anymore. And everything's okay now because you got your drug. And you didn't know everything wasn't okay because everything was fine, but you were going through withdrawal because of a rogue bacteria colony, because of our lack of mindfulness and because of marketing from our food systems and marketing from this industrial complex that has dollar figures on every one of our heads. And what they've done is they've allowed these bacteria colonies to get so big that it's a self-feeding system. And that's why we do it. And we can break that system, but we have to break it with mindfulness. How many times, in my life, I've been on every diet I could think of, but it was always one step removed. It was always feeding this guy, by the way, I got my shirt on, it's walking compost. And that's really what we are. We're a composting unit inside of us with those same bacteria that do the compost in the gardens. Those are exactly the same bacteria that produce serotonin in our gut. That's why when you work in a garden, it is said that for 24 to 48 hours after working in a garden, you will have elevated serotonin levels from the bacteria that were in the garden that produced the serotonin and got in. And if you happen to have a cut on your hand, it could last up to a week or two because you've gotten some exposure to some of those compounds direct. that's the reality of what the world we live in really is now that we can understand it. And this is relatively new because in the year, 2010, 2012, they took on a new project called the Microbiome Project, where they now were going to do DNA analysis on all of the microbial beings that live in us. And they number a huge number. They outnumber the human cells by 10 to 1. And some estimates are even higher because we really don't even understand this whole system. But what we are understanding is that we are part of nature. We're not special. We need this balance. Just like monocropping is causing problems in agriculture, if we're monocropping inside of us, if we're not diversified, if we don't have all of the different species that we are meant to have, and the more the better. So one of the things that, this is the book Grow a New Body, so everybody could see that. I hope it's not backwards like it is in my screen, but it's Grow a New Body, and I can put it out there. It's a great book. I mean, there's so many about the microbiome. This guy talks on a pretty advanced level about really being able to get to optimal performance, really being able to even use supplements, using everything we know about the human body and supplements, being able to use that. Because by the way, when he was done, his heart is 100%, his brain is 100%. He totally cured himself of all of the ailments. And he did it all naturally, using natural foods, using natural processes. Meditation is another thing. If you think about it, our minds and our microbes are all one. So if we've got an active mind and we're always going and we're always going, we're always going, these microbes are always going and they're always going and they're always going. And when we go into a meditative state, when we're able to take and change the waves in our brain the same way we do when we sleep, we're able to do that. We're able to emit different chemicals to our microbes as well, because it's two-way. What's happening up here is happening down there. What's happening down there is happening up here as well. So like an example was, before, when I was not mindful of my bacteria, and let's say something would happen, like I'm supposed to be somewhere and I'm late and I realize it, and all of a sudden what's happened is my mind has caused my brain to produce adrenaline and cortisone, and my gut bacteria have been put on charge, and my gut bacteria are told, we've got a situation here. It's not a dinosaur with a fight and flight, but it's late for something which causes the same reaction in today's society. So immediately the bacteria that I used to have would create a lot of chemicals, which gave me a lot more anxiety. Made me feel worse about the fact that I was going to be late. Change the blood pumping levels, change the patterns, everything, because that's what my bacteria were doing. That's what they're capable of doing. They were parasitic. They were candida. They were all these bacteria that I really didn't want, but I didn't know who I had in my corral because I didn't know that I even had a corral. I didn't even know, I wasn't even thinking about these organisms that live inside of me that are as important as my brain is to me. These are as important, if not more important. So what happens now is the same thing can happen. I have a Zoom meeting coming up today. Instead of being anxious about it, every time I thought about what I was going to do, my bacteria were producing more serotonin. They were producing more dopamine. They were relieving stress, because those are the bacteria that are now resident within me in big populations. I'm the guy who wants, if I can have between 100 billion and 100 trillion microbes, and the difference is 1,000-fold, I want to go to the upper end. It's just the kind of person I am. I want to see what it's like, to see what it really feels like. And it feels amazing to go from what the microbes used to be to where they are today. Think about this. They can take a fecal sample and they could tell with a certainty of over 95% whether you're overweight, obese, or if you're lean body weight. They can go one step further, and if they see somebody with an obese microbiome, They take that and they put that in a germ-free mouse, and that germ-free mouse will become obese. And that is because different colonies of bacteria produce different forms of energy, and some are more efficient than others, and other bacteria that are being fed, like Candida, are going to constantly be calling for food from you, and calling for food from them is not very good food to be taking in, because it's food that is going to be eaten by Candida and producing energy, which is not the best source of energy, like sugars that will feed cancers or defective cells, defective mitochondria, any of those. So by being aware that we can change this composition within us, we can then change how we're going to react in the real world to situations, because we're part of that real world. You know, we just feel separate from it because we are separate from it. We're not operating the way we should be. You know, we've got Candida going wild. We've got, you know, too many Big Macs have been consumed, not enough lentils, not enough beans. The beauty is, once you start with mindfulness, little changes make big differences. And if I were just thinking about it, if I could take a colony of bacteria and they only live 20 minutes and they want to reproduce in that 20 minutes, wow, you know, I've got the power of exponential. I can multiply big numbers pretty quick with mindfulness. Because I could, if I wanted to, 3 times a day, I could eat pea soup, and I could have these colonies growing, and when their food source is starting to go down and they're starting to diminish in colonies, I could boost it up again and get them going again, because I got lots of colonies. They're even going to be eating more, and they're going to do it quicker. And then I could do it another time, and I could do that all in my 8-hour window, and then shut them all down overnight. And let all these guys produce everything they're going to be, and then let the whole system rest, and you know, go the opposite way and detoxify, and then start the next day, and then you have a clean slate again. And everybody is gone the next day, and it's time to start over. And 55% of your excrement is microbial bodies that were alive inside of you, and that's how we know. And it's interesting how this all happened. I mean, I belonged to a group, it was called, I think it was Biome, where they had a test study where they would, every month they would send me a test kit, and it was a $500 test that they were going to do for 5 months in a row. And you apply with your insurance, but if your insurance didn't cover it, they had a grant to cover it for trying to do these studies. So insurance immediately declines it, and the grant kicks in. So I was able to send in. And at that time, they weren't that accurate because it was early on, but you could see the different ones, and you could see your diversification. And that was the beauty. I could see where I was at, and I had a picture of what was going on inside of me. And it's not that hard to do anymore, to do these tests. The tests are available, and they're reasonable, and a lot of naturopaths are doing that for people. I can also tell you that you can get a real feel for it when you start putting these good food stocks in you, and you start becoming aware. You know, there is no perfect microbiome. It's always changing. So if it's always changing, what you want to start doing is you just want to be focusing on how you could change it to be with the right food stocks that you have and the right results that you want to get. So what I would like to do is I would like to open it up because we only have 15 minutes, and this is the last of the classes for the gut microbiome series. We're going to do some more on hemp and its connection with the epigenetics with the human body. The cannabis plant is the most epigenetically connected to the human genome, and that's why you hear so much about CBD, because those plants have a huge connection to the human body. We actually have receptors that actually get those photochemicals, those compounds that are in that hemp or that cannabis plant, and when they come into us, they excite our system and get us to start doing these things that we want, which is to be healthy. So does anybody have any questions here that you'd like to be able to talk about? Any questions at all that I can help you with?
Okay, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Simply, if we just stop eating sugar, would that make a huge difference?
Absolutely. Because sugar, what sugar does is sugar, and the first thing it does is it jumps our blood sugar levels very fast, very quick, which means our body is going to start producing insulin to knock that high source down. And anytime we're producing insulin, we're putting a lot of stress on the pancreas. And that means store that energy. That's what insulin does. Our body is not meant to go into that high sugar state. If you look at the proper nutrition for the body, here's the beauty of the way the body was designed. If you eat beans today and your microbes break those beans down today, they are a low glycemic source of energy. So that means low sugar for your body, but long-term energy. The next 24 hours after you eat those beans, any meal that you eat that has a higher sugar load will be reduced and dampened from the residual effect of eating these beans in the prior period. So in other words, not only do these microbes, when they're properly fed, so remember, if I'm eating sugar, sugar is going to come in through the upper digestive system, right in that small intestine, going to get into the body really quick. If I'm eating a bean, it's got to go through the 27 feet into the long colon, the 6-foot colon, where the bacteria break it down, low glycemic sugar. Now all of those microbes that have broken it down, all those chemicals and everything are going to have such a beautiful effect on the body that for the next 24 hours, if I eat something that wants to raise my blood sugar, I'm going to have a buffer and it's not going to go as high. And if you do that day after day after day, you'll automatically lose weight because the beans will continue to lower that sugar level with anything if you didn't change all that sugar intake. But just putting beans in the diet regularly will have that effect because it'll be dampening it. Follow that?
Sort of. So, not eating sugar, that would simply automatically help kill the bad guys in the stomach?
Yeah. So think of it this way. If the simplest, sugar is like a food that will feed any inhabitant within you. And it will feed the most aggressive ones the easiest because they're going to be able to be most aggressive. And we don't want that. We don't want the most aggressive microbes inside of us to proliferate. We want the ones to proliferate, which are the ones that are going to give us our health, our real health. And those are the ones that have to have a different food source because they don't eat the sugars. The sugars never get to them. And they wouldn't eat the sugar anyway. They're too smart for that. That's not their food stock. Those are the guys we want growing. The sugars are cheap energy source. They're quick energy source. They're not a deep energy source. It's kind of like I could take paper in my, let's say I have a fireplace and I want to get energy out of it. I take paper and I crumple it up and I throw that in there and I light it. What happens? It gets so hot so fast that most of the heat goes up the stack. And then if instead I take a piece of coal and I put it in there, and once it starts, it just produces more and more heat. And it's this low burn, and it's a powerful burn. And then I don't have to try to store that. If I kept putting paper in there, let's say I kept crumpling up paper and just keep throwing it in there, I'm going to be producing so much that the body says we got to store it somewhere, and they're going to try to store it somewhere with insulin. We don't want that. What we should look at is that insulin should be like a fire extinguisher only when the body gets to extreme sugar levels, because it normally wouldn't happen in normal life. But instead we use it like a salt shaker every day, because every time we're taking sugar in, our body has to do something with it. Really, if you take a look at what the normal diet would be, we wouldn't have foods refined to the point that we would have all these sugars and refined foods coming into our diet. But now they are. And because of that, we have colony infestations that aren't mindful of what we want. They're just a byproduct of the food stock that we were bringing in. But now we can be mindful and start to have more of a purpose as to why to change. It's difficult for me to change my diet when I wanted to do it without a purpose. But it's real easy. My diet is not diet. It's a feeding thing that I have to do to my microbes now. It's a different way of thinking. It might sound crazy to somebody that doesn't think that way, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm taking it right down to that state. Well, I got to feed these guys today. You know, what am I going to put in there? If I don't take care of them, it's no different than taking care of my dog or the chickens or the cat, and I have to have different foods for each one. So if I want to be healthy, you know, so every day I'm trying to put in, you know, if I'm going to drink some, I want to drink a kombucha and it has ginger. So here's what I kind of try to do is I try to make sure that I'm feeding, and I make sure that I'm always trying to kill off the bad guys. How do I kill off the bad guys? Ginger in my diet, turmeric, spices, oregano. Remember all of these, remember I said that plants are like the chemists, they produce all these chemicals. And then we have all these herbs that we use for tastes and for flavors. Well, they're finding out these herbs have more of a difference because they work on the colonies, like oregano oil. So oregano in the Italian foods has a very powerful effect on pathogenic bacteria colonies that want to grow in our gut. So lo and behold, you can use oregano as a way to get rid of the parasites. And garlic in a certain way does the same. Ginger, cinnamon, lemon, lime, hot peppers, all those different things. So look at those as being the guys that are going to be, you know, and turmeric and all those things. Those are the ones that are going to be painful to those colonies. And then the other side of it is the ones that we're going to be feeding to the colonies. So we're going to be putting a little bit of detriment to the bad guys all the time and always giving a little bit of food to the good guys all the time. And if you do that in a way of awareness so that you're looking at this food intake as being different, as being something that can get an end result, you'll get a result. You'll get that healthfulness, because the human body was designed to live long and die quick, not die slowly over time. That's not what it was designed to do. But when systems get out of whack, and why? Nutrients, switches, things that we are now learning about. And bacteria are an integral part of that. And something as simple as having a dog in your house dramatically increases your diversification of microbes, because you are part of your environment. The people that you live with and around are exchanging microbiome with you all the time. Even with COVID here, we're still doing it. The loved ones that you live, your microbiomes have common. And like my wife, when I started eating kimchi, she wanted to throw me out because of the smell. And after a year of being close to me, she acquired the taste for kimchi. And how does that happen? The microbes got inside of her over time, started a colony, started to grow, started to allow that now she could not only eat it, but crave it. Let's see.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
it's your sister. I just saw that a couple people asked you some questions on chat, and forgive me if you've already answered this, but I want to make sure their questions get answered. Someone said, what about beets? Did you cover that already?
No. So beets are great food. Again, great microbiome food. Beautiful, beautiful colors in there. The deep reds, super for the body. And also the beet leaves, the greens. Make sure you're consuming those as well. Absolutely, beets are beautiful for the body. And you can ferment beets. So you can take them, you can put them in a salt solution, get a ferment going, and then bring them live into the body. That's how good they are. If you can ferment them and make something out of them, you know that you can ferment them inside as well. And anytime you're taking a fermented food, like fermented pickles or fermented cabbages or fermented even green beans or beets, and you're bringing them in, you have a better chance of transporting those microbes in, because you're bringing the food with the bacteria already starting to consume it into your body, and then bring more food stock in. Okay?
Okay, and then there was another question about gel crystals. You were talking about gel crystals, and someone wanted to know where they could get those.
Gel crystals. I don't recall.
In your recipe.
For the Aspelardi? The recipe to get rid of candida. Okay.
Yes.
So the place that this gentleman buys, I'll have to Let me think where I can post it. Is Facebook a good place for me to post it? Or what you could do is you can email me, and what I'll give you is all of the information. My email is tom@singerfarmnaturals.com. And if you just send me an email and let me know what you'd like me to send to you, I'm happy to do that. And what I'll be doing here is, you know, later in August, getting into September, I'm going to do some more gut series. What we're going to do is we're going to make up a batch of Espellardi, and I'll pick up a bottle of the probiotics. So if people want to make their own, they can come in instead of buying a whole bottle. I'll give you some of the capsules, and we'll make some here in case people don't. And if you want to start doing it, we'll do it. So that, and we can do it over a chat group so that we can talk about it in classes here. One of the things it talks about as a precaution is that you don't want to take sugars 3-4 days before you're going to take this Espellardi, because it could produce a lot of gas, because the yeast, this will be an aggressive eater of those sugars because it wants to get rid of candida. So it's going to be fighting for those sugars with candida, and you don't want to start that battle. So you don't want to have sugars when you're taking it. So you want to just be giving it good feedstocks and getting the Espellardi in there so you don't create a big war within you. So you got to have a little bit of a strategy when you do it. And we'll talk about that strategy, and we'll do that in September, because September will be a good time. We'll go back to the gut microbiome class, and then what we'll do is we'll also give you some support by doing some of those, and we'll have the meetings right around then so that people could talk about anything that they're going through. But it's a great procedure. I love doing it. I do it, you know, once a year, just to keep things in balance is the way I look at it. And you know, I don't eat any sugars in my diet. You know, if it is, it's extremely minimal. I just noticed that if I do, I'm so in tune with my body, I can feel it in my joints shortly thereafter. You know, within a day or two, I can feel the inflammation in the joint. I can pinpoint it back to the sugars that cause the inflammatories, and I don't want that, so I don't do that.
Well, Tom, talking about sugars, someone also had a question about, you had talked about kombucha, and there's sugar in kombucha, obviously, and their concern is raising your insulin level if you're drinking kombucha.
Okay, so it depends on the fermentation where they put some of the sugars in. A lot of times they're adding sugar in the primary fermentation. A lot of times they'll add it in the secondary just for flavoring afterwards. So it's nice to know, you know, kind of what they're doing in making the kombucha. I personally, I drink kombucha. I have one a day. I believe that the benefits far outweigh if there are detriments with that sugar. The levels are extremely low. I really want to get that fungus in my body every day, and that fungus is coming in with that kombucha. So it's part of my regimen. And if that's the sugar that I'm taking, and I don't have a direct answer if it's been fermented down or not. You know, I'm just looking here. There is organic cane sugar that goes into it during that fermentation process. But I also know that that sugar is the fuel for a lot of the fungus that is the kombucha, you know, the mother that you're feeding. So I don't have a direct answer. I know personally, I have a kombucha every single day because I believe in it that strongly, that it is part of a regimen that has a definite, you know, risk reward, and I definitely want to have it in my diet. So
Yeah, I've actually looked at the labels for kombucha because, you know, my son used to make it. And so I was looking at the amount of sugar that he was adding to it. And you're right, it's feeding the mother for that kombucha to ferment it. But when you look at the end result, I believe the residual sugar is really pretty low. You can look at any one, like at Whole Foods, for example, there's usually just about 3 grams of sugar in the ones that I've purchased. So it is really low. Even though you're seeing the cane sugar on the ingredients, the residual's low. So somebody else also, I think your answer is going to be similar, but you were talking about eating fruits, and their concern again is the sugar.
Yeah, so you want to look at the glycemic index of different fruits. So all fruits are not the same. So an example is tart cherries, which we know very well because we distribute tart cherry juice. That is a low glycemic sugar. It's only 54 on the glycemic index. So what I recommend is that if you look at, there's a index which is called the glycemic index, and you can locate every food on there. And you want low glycemic foods in your diet. And fruits that are low glycemic will give you exactly the same advantage. They won't spike your blood sugar, and they'll give you all the phytonutrients without any detriments. Okay. Well, it's 7:30. It's been wonderful to have everybody attend, and I hope I've opened your eyes to maybe looking at this process that we call eating a little bit differently, and maybe taking it as being a responsibility. And I can only tell you that what you do inside of you, what you can grow inside of you, can really affect the experience you have as a human being on this planet, both your mental as well as your physical. Because these microbes are something that are an integral part of our life. They're as essential as anything that we need for our human body. We need the microbes to be diversified. We need to realize that we need to feed the proper ones. And if we do that, our immune systems won't be taxed. If we get something that is going to cause our bodies to have an immune reaction, we can give 100% of our energy to it. We're not wasting it by just every day being in an immune condition already because we're not feeding and we've got a leaky gut, or we haven't fed the microbes. So the systems are out. We just got to be responsible. We could do it, and it doesn't cost a fortune. It's not like you got to buy a $5,000 oven to do it, or appliance. It's just eating foods. At first, you may not like them, but it's not you that doesn't like them. It's the microbes that you don't have that aren't asking for them. And once they start asking for them, you just feed them, and you're going to get the benefits. And your cravings will change. Your consumption will change. Your whole relationship. I lost 40, 50 pounds without trying to lose weight. And it's because I have microbes that are suitable for a lean, mean body, as opposed to an obese, different metabolized body. But that was a choice that I had in making that difference. And every one of us can do that, because that we can change, and easy. Just make sure it's organic, because chickpeas are one of the greatest foods. They're also one of the highest in glyphosate. So make sure that you're getting foods that are clean. By the way, it was interesting because last week's Zoom meeting we now have on Singer Farm Naturals YouTube site, and we had quite a few views, and we had quite a few comments, and most of the comments were from Monsanto. I believe it was Monsanto paid trolls, as they're called, breaking apart all of the talks that I had, calling me an organic farmer activist, because I guess I did talk quite openly about how bad glyphosate is for the human body. But it was interesting because I got the eyes of the big boys on us. And I don't mean to bash anybody, including big corporations. My view is we have a choice, and I don't want anything on my food. I have a right to eat clean food, and the right is to know that it's available if we want it. We just got to go for organic, and we can do that, and we can be healthy. And if corporations want to make tons of money, that's fine. You don't take it with you and you die anyway. What the hell's the big urge to get it all? Instead, get the right microbes inside of you. Your experience as a human being will be you won't have to go outside to get happiness. Happiness comes from inside. The serotonin levels, all of that, you can find that your glass is one drop full when it's only one drop full. But you can have that optimism because you're capable of it. We're very creative. We can do anything, but we just got to have the right attitude. But the wrong microbes, the parasites inside of you, candida inside of you, boy, oh boy, I wasn't a nice person. I'm a good person, but I have bad chemicals inside of me. I mean, I think someday will come, maybe I'll see it, where somebody's defense for a crime will be the microbes made me do it, Your Honor. I got bad parasites inside of me, but just the way I think. But I hope that I instill you to challenge your belief systems, challenge what we do as a norm, as maybe being something that we can have more input into, and create this amazing diversity and this amazing force inside of you that's living. And it's actually, you know, they actually have a certain environment. Here's one of the things is that certain bacteria inside of us that are really beneficial do not like oxygen. They like an anaerobic condition as opposed to aerobic, which certain bacteria produce oxygen, which kills off the other ones. So, you know, there's more to these battles. So if you're eating tons of food that feeds them, like, you know, lots of meats and lots of things, they produce oxygen, which kills off some of these bacteria because they don't like that oxygen in there. So we have other factors that are there. But I'll tell you that the simpler you keep it and you feed these microbes and you go from having only 100 billion to having 100 trillion, you're going to feel 1,000 times different. That I'll guarantee you, because it's all chemicals. It's all chemistry. You know, this produces this, and has this effect on the body. The only difference is instead of going to a pharmaceutical company and getting the pill and taking the pill, you're going to do it the way it's meant to be done in nature, because now we know how to do it, and now we can understand how you can do it yourself without the bills and without all of the BS that goes along with it. It's all there, and it's simple. It's not rocket science. Just keep it simple. Well, thank you, everybody. Time is up, and I like to keep them on time. So we'll keep you posted. We'll do some on CBD next month. We'll probably take a week or so off, and then we'll do another series and keep everybody going with information as much as we can.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Have a
Tom.
great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care.